So hey guys, so welcome back to our tutorials. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to create something called a Pomodoro timer. This is a timer that times out after a specified number of minutes, seconds. For instance, this one is set to 25 minutes. So what we can do is you can start the Pomodoro timer, then it starts to count down, and then you can stop it. Then it stops, then you can start again, which is kind of like resuming. And then you can reset this Pomodoro timer and then you can start it again as you wish. So you're going to create this using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So let's get started. So I'm going to reset this one. And then I'm going to go live inside the new project I'm creating. And then the next thing is let's get started. So the first thing is to link the CSS, the JavaScript to the HTML. So how I'm going to do it is to start with the CSS. So it's the right link, CSS. Then this one links to a style.css file, which corresponds to the style.css file name on top. And then let's link the JavaScript. So we can link it using script, then src, which is script.js. Just like that. And then let's start with the HTML. So what I'm going to create is, as always, let's create a card. And then let's create a heading level 2 and say Pomodoro timer. The next thing is to create the actual timer. So you can say p.timer. That will create you a paragraph with a class of timer. And then for starters, let's start with 25 minutes. You can see it there. And then before I even continue, let me go back. Let me go into my CSS. And I showed you how you can load the Poppins font. So I'm just going to copy the link to the Poppins font. This is the Poppins font link. And then let's write the default CSS style. So margin 0. And then padding 0 as well. Then a box sizing. So you say border. So box sizing of border box, that's it. And then you can see now everything is at the edges. So let's grab the body real quick and for position stuff in the middle. So you can say DF for display flex. Justify content to the center. You can see now the Pomodoro timer goes to the center. And then let's specify the font. We already have Poppins font. So you can say font family, and then you can say Poppins, and then sans serif as a fallback. And then you can see the Pomodoro timer has been updated as expected. The next thing is to add a background color to the body. I'm going to use FA, F8, F1. All right. And then let's grab the card itself. So we can say dot card. Background color here, I'm going to do #FA, EAB1. All right, you can now start to see it. And then let's give it a padding because everything is at the edges. So let's continue. And then let's add a padding. So we can start with a padding of, we can start with a padding of 1 rem on the top and bottom, and then 2 rem on the left and right, which is vertical and horizontal. And then the next thing is to display this flex, and then flex direction of column. And then let's give a gap of 5 pixels between the elements. So you can see it real well right now, but let's go to the body and give it a padding. You can see this one is almost at the edge of the body. So we can see padding 2 rem. And then now it's pushed to where we would like it to be. The next thing is that you can realize this is very sharp. Let's give it a border and see. So we can say border is equals to 2 pixels solid black. You can see the edges are too sharp. Let's add a border radius here. So border radius 5 pixels. That looks a bit nice. And then let's go back to the HTML and finish up on the HTML. So after the timer, we now have action buttons. So we can say dot actions to create an actions div. And then let's create 3 buttons. So we'll say, okay, so button. Then let's give them all of them the same class. So dot btn. And then you multiply by 3 to get three buttons. So if you save that, let me show you. So we get generated 3 buttons. And then the first button will say start. The next button will say stop, stop. And the final one will say reset. Right, you can see the buttons there. And then let's give them individual classes. So this one will be start, stop, and reset. Those are individual classes. So that's it all for the HTML. So let's go back to the CSS and finish styling these elements. So the next thing I want to style is the timer. The timer is this one. So we have a paragraph with a class of timer. This is the paragraph with a class of timer. Let's style it. So we can say dot timer. Let's increase its font size to maybe 2.5 rem. Right. Then let's make it semi-bold. So we can say font weight let's use numbers. So 600 is for the semi-bold. And then you can see it. And then we want everything to be the middle. So we can go back to the card and say align items, the center. Then now everything is in the middle. And then let's continue. The next thing we want to style is the button. We gave all these buttons the same class btn. So let's grab that class btn. So let's grab that class btn and start styling. So we can say btn. Then we first remove the border, say border none. All right, let's add a padding. So this padding will be 6 pixels vertical and then 10 pixels horizontal. You can see it. And then a color, let's give them all of them a color of white. And then we want the text to be uppercase, so we can say text transform uppercase. All right. And then the cursor should be pointer so that whenever I hover over it, the cursor is pointing. And then a transition. So we'll add the transition later on. I'll show you why we need a transition. And then whenever you hover over these buttons, but before we do that, let's style the individual buttons. So we have the start. I want the start to be green, so I can say dot start. Then background color to be green. You see the start pops up. And then let's do the dot stop. Background color, let's do red because this one signifies some dangers because we are trying to stop. And then let's do the reset. And then the reset will have a background color of gray. Now with all these 3 buttons, so let's first make sure that whenever you hover over these buttons, we have some opacity change and some scaling change. So we can say dot btn and then grab the hover state. So the hover is when the mouse goes on top of it. You can say opacity 0.7. So if I go here, you can see now the opacity changes. The next thing is that I want to scale it. So we can say transform scale 1.05. Now if I hover over this, you can see it is scaling, but they are scaling at a very fast rate. So we need to add a transition from one stage to another. And we do that by going to the parent and doing transition. We say maybe point. You can do let's scale the scale, then we do it at 1. We don't want to scale. We don't want to transition the opacity. Let's just transition the scale. That's why you can define the transition. Now if I hover, you can see now it is transitioning from one stage to another, and that's it all for the CSS. Let's jump into JavaScript and see how we can create this Pomodoro timer. All right, so the first thing I need, as always, is a reference to these 3 buttons and adding some event listeners to these 3 buttons, each of them, so that I can at least capture that specific event. So I'm going to start with the start button. So say start btn is equals to document dot query selector, and then we select dot start const stop btn is equals to document dot query selector, and then dot stop const reset btn is equals to document dot query selector, and then dot reset. So here we have an equal sign. So I'm grabbing all these 3 buttons, so nothing new here. And then I also need the timer so that I can update it using JavaScript. So you just need a reference to the timer. So I'm going to say const timer to document dot query selector, and then dot timer. All these are the classes provided to each specific one. Like for the timer, you can see it has a class of timer, the start, stop, and reset. So we have access to the 3 buttons, and you also have access to the div we want to update. So the next thing is to add some event listeners. And before I add an event listener, let me add a function that will handle the click. And then this one, as always, will expect a type. This type will be used to distinguish between did we press the start, did we press the reset, did we press the stop, because this function will be the same that is handling all those 3 events. So let's start with the start btn dot add event listener, and the event is click. Then since we cannot call this function here so that we can pass the type, sorry, start. So we can't do this because it's not our duty to call this function. It's the duty of JavaScript whenever it captures this specific event. So how we do it is that we pass another anonymous function that wraps it. And this anonymous function is not called, but whenever it's called, it goes ahead and returns. It goes ahead and calls this handle click function. So let's do the same for the other 3 buttons. So 1, 2. The next one was stop, and then reset. So we say stop button, and then reset button, just like that. So we have reference, we can capture. So let's toast. So alert type. Now if I click over the start, you can see it says start here. And then if I click the stop, you can see it says stop. And then the reset says reset. So everything is working as expected. So the first thing before I forget is that I need to create a time. This will be the time that is diminishing here. So how can I create this time? I'm going to use let and then create a time. And before I start, I want to create a default time. So I'll say const default. So I want 25 minutes. So I need to convert that to seconds. So it is 60 or 25 times 60. So that's my default time. So this is the 25 minutes you are seeing here. This is what I want to start with. So I'm going to create my time. My time will be the default time. That is the time that is timing this. So the next thing is to create an interval ID variable. So we can say inter. And we say that the reason we need an interval ID variable is to store the unique identifier of a specific interval, so that we can clear that interval and prevent memory leaks, and we can also stop the counting. We can prevent the countdown. So what I'm going to do here is that this timer, at some point it will come to overflow to 0. So what I'm going to do is that if time is less than or equals to 0, what I want to change the type now to be stop. Regardless of what the user typed, we are going to reset it back to stop because the time is less than 0. We don't want to get negative time. So the next one is to use a switch statement. So I can say switch on the type. We said that this type, we can either get a type of start, stop, and reset. So let's start with the first case, which is the start case start. Then the first thing we always do inside switch case statement is to break, because if you forget that, then things won't be as easy as possible. And always, whenever we are dealing with the start, we want, whenever a user starts, we want to make sure there is no interval, an interval ID that is present. If there is an interval ID, it means that this Pomodoro timer is already calculating, and this person should either use stop or reset. So what I'm going to do is to use an if statement and say if interval ID, if there is an interval ID, just return. Don't give errors, just return. And then we can say, we can now reassign the interval ID to a number now. So we can say interval ID is equals to, we set the timeout, set interval, and you can see the signature for the set interval. The set interval receives two arguments. The first argument is the callback function. This is the function that will be called. And the next argument is the interval or the delay. So we want to call this every second. So we convert 1 second to milliseconds, which is 1000 milliseconds. And then, so this function will be executed every second. That means we can subtract 1 second. We can subtract 1 second from the time. And in that, it will give the illusion that this time is running out. All right? I hope you understand that, because this is the heart and soul of this. So what I'm saying is that we need this function that is called the set interval function. The work of the set interval function is to set a delay of some specified value. Like for instance, we have given 1000 milliseconds. So this is a delay of each second. It is going to call this callback function. So 1 second, it delays. Another 1 second, it calls the function. So this function essentially will be called every second. This function will be called every second. That means, and this function returns an ID. This ID is what we are calling the interval ID, and we are storing it globally, because whenever someone clicks stop, we are going to stop that interval. That interval happens if this, for instance, this is happening every second. If you have 10 of these and the functions are heavy, then all your RAM is gone. So we need a way to stop it. That's why we are tracking the interval ID. Right? So what will happen in this callback function? We said in the callback function, we want to just subtract 1 second from the time. So we can say time is equals to time minus 1. So this is a bit easier to understand because we are just subtracting 1 from the time. We had 25 minutes. We convert the 25 minutes into seconds by giving it a default time. Then we start subtracting 1 and updating the DOM with the new value after we subtract 1. So let's continue. After subtracting 1, what do? We are going to create yet a new function that is called update timer. So you can come here and say function update timer, and then it receives the time. You just want to understand, why do we need a function? So we need a function because this update timer might be used in several cases. Like whenever we reset, we also want to update the timer to the 25 to the default value. So we essentially need to group some function of code so that we don't repeat ourselves. So this update timer, its job is to receive a specific time in seconds, and then go ahead and convert this into minutes and seconds, and then update the DOM. This is the work of this update function. And then inside my function here, I have already changed the time. So I'm just going to call update timer. And then after updating timer, we give it the current time. So what will happen if we started at 1 minute, which is 60 seconds, if we started at an interval of 60 seconds, what we are going to do is that we are going to subtract 1 from 60, we get 59, and then we call the update timer function. This update timer function will receive the 59 second and update the DOM for the user to see. Right. So how does this update timer should work? So the update timer should calculate the number of minutes and seconds from the given time. So we can say, let's use S here for the seconds. So we can say let minutes equals to. So how do you get minutes out of seconds? You basically divide by. So let me open a node environment. I can say node. So let's say we have 90 minutes. So how many hours are in 90? How many minutes? No, let's start with 90 seconds. How many minutes are in 90 seconds? So you can do 90 divided by 60. So you can see we have 1.5 minutes in 90 seconds. We don't care about the seconds, we care about the minutes. So how can we do it? We flow this using math.flow, and then 90 divided by 60. And then you get the one. So that's exactly what we are going to do. So minutes will be math.flow s over 60. What about the second? Let seconds is equals to. Let's go back. So we said that we use the math.flow to get the whole number of a decimal. How can we get the other end? Because this is the seconds. If 90 seconds is equals to 1.5 minutes, how many seconds are remaining after taking out the 1 minute? So how we can do it, we can use the modulus operator. So we can say 90 modulus 60. Then you get 30 seconds. So 90 minutes is 1 hour 30 seconds. So how we can do it now is to say seconds is equals to S modulus 60. And then finally, after getting the minutes and the time, the seconds, we just update the DOM. We call the timer.text content, and then we add it. So the other issue is that I showed you guys how you can use pad start. The pad start essentially, so let's see. Let's say we have a value 1. We can say string of 1 dot pad start to n. So how does pad start work? Pad start returns the string representation. So in our timer, we don't want to get timers like 5, 4, 3. We want 0, 5, 0, 4, 0, 3, 0, 2 on this end. So how can we add that? If we have 1, how can we add a 0 in front? We use the pad start, and then you specify the number of items you need. And then if it doesn't fit that length, what do? We just add a 0 or a 0 string. So to do all that work, I'm going to create yet another function called add pad start, and then it receives a value and then returns string representation of that value. And then dot pad start that thing. The pad starts in the front. So and then like that. So if the string length does not equal the specified here too, then that empty space will be filled by this, which is a 0. So the text content will now be. So we add pad start to the minutes, and then we add the seconds. Just like that. That is the goal of the update timer function. So the update timer function receives the seconds and then divides them, modularizes them to get the minutes and the second, and then we essentially update the DOM. Just it. There's no more other work that we are doing there. So the next thing is to now call the update timer. We provide the time, and then this one will be called on every second. Let's look at the next case. So the next case is stop. You always need to implement stop because whenever you are testing, you're not going to test without a way to stop it. So whenever we are stopping, what actions do we care about? So whenever you are starting is that we need to make sure, no, whenever you are stopping, so we need to make sure there is an interval ID because we are going to clear that interval. So we can say if not interval, so if there is no interval ID, you just return, and then otherwise you clear interval of the interval ID that is present. So the clear interval prevents the set interval function from continuously calling the callback on a specified amount of time. And then after doing that, we reset the interval ID equals to undefined. So why do we change the interval ID back to undefined? It's because some of these logics are dependent on the interval ID, and whenever we stop this, the interval ID is gone because we cleared the interval. So you also need to clear this variable because it is used in some of these places. You can see in the start. So if you don't clear the interval and make sure it's undefined, these errors will start popping up right left. And then finally, let's create the case of reset. And then here we can say break. I almost forgot. And then here I can also break before I start writing my code. On the reset, it is quite similar. So we just set the time back to the default time. We update the timer and give it the time. And then we check if there is an interval ID. If there is, we clear that interval. We clear the interval. Clearing means getting rid of, and then we reset back the interval ID to undefined. And that's it, guys. Let's test out our finished version. Let's see. You can see now it is working. We stop. It is stopped. We start again. We stop. And then we set. So that's it, guys. That's how you can create a Pomodoro timer using JavaScript. Follow for more and make sure you like this video. Thank you.